Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Now That You Mention It podcast with Roll, Jay, and RJ.
I'm Roll.
I'm Jay.
And I'm RJ.
Hey, guys, I want to say thank you for all the support you guys have been giving us, all the comments that have been rolling in. Just remember, guys, if you like what we're doing, if you'll hit the like and subscribe button down at the bottom and then click the little bell so that you get the notifications when our new content comes out. We really enjoy, doing this for you guys. We really enjoy talking with each other. And we got I think a good episode today. This last episode, we finished up with the Michael Jordan / Chicago Bull documentary, The Last Dance. So I kind of challenged Roland and RJ here, along with myself, to do something a little different. So we went back and watched some episodes of shows that we had never seen that we kind of suggested. I suggested to Roland an episode of Game of Thrones, and RJ suggested to him an episode of Narcos Mexico. Roland suggested to RJ an episode of
The Last Kingdom.
The Last Kingdom, and I recommended an episode of The Crown, and they both challenged me with an episode of Breaking Bad and an episode of House of Cards. So today, our entire episode is going to be about reviewing those episodes, if you can believe that. So, first of all, guys, welcome. Hope everybody's doing well this week. Hope everything's going good. How are you guys doing?
Go ahead, RJ.
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Obviously a lot of things are reopening, and, I think there's that, kind of feeling amid the country, but even the state, that, everything's kind of A-okay. And, I think we still need to practice some sort of caution. But other than that, personally, I'm just working as much as I can. And then, still limiting how much I am going out to do things. Obviously, you can't just stay in the house and,
I think
wait for it to pass.
Well, for me, I agree. I've been taking it very slow in getting back into my old routine. I have been going to the office more, partially because my partner was in a slight bike accident and he's kind of sidelined. Yeah, it was nothing too serious, but serious enough that he got sidelined for a couple of weeks, and so he's recuperating. I'm heading into the office just to deal with, any paperwork that might need to be chased down, or to deal with any, quick decisions that have to be made that can't wait for him. But for the most part, it's still very limited hours there. But I agree that it's still, we're in that learning period, and I see a significant amount of people out and about. I see quite a few people without masks, which is a little frustrating.
Settling, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think sometimes it's just we need to be a little bit more mindful of other people. I still go back and say that we as a society have become so resistant about being inconvenienced and compromising our freedoms that there are a lot of people that challenge you if you say anything to them about wearing a mask. But for the most part, I still see a lot of civility, a lot of people still trying to keep some sort of social distancing. But I don't know if you guys saw any of the reports over the Memorial Day weekend, but there were certain hot spots that were just packed to the gill.
It blows my mind. I think it was in Arkansas where they had that pool party with hundreds of people there at lakes, and things like that. And I get it. People want to get out. I think we were kind of lucky in the fact that here in Dallas, Memorial Day weekend was kind of rained out. It rained. And so a lot of people weren't really out and about as much as they probably would have been had it been a nice, beautiful, sunny day. And I think that, will in the long run at some point help us out. But, hey, that's just me. But one of the things, again, taking advantage of, the stay at home, safer at home, quarantine stuff is the fact that we got to watch some television. So we're going to get started. We're going to kind of go one episode each. RJ, we're going to start with you. So I had challenged you to watch an episode of The Crown, which was the episode in which Queen Elizabeth becomes the queen. It's the episode in which her father dies while she's in Kenya, I believe, doing a tour for her father. So let's get started there. What did you think of the episode?
I think it's a pretty important episode for that series, I would assume, just because it's an important part of history in general. So it was definitely, interesting to see that, she was over there in Nairobi doing her tour, the Commonwealth tour, I believe is what it was called. And, she was out there, her and Prince Philip were out there with, the giraffes and the elephants and, all those different animals that they have over there.
That was a pretty intense scene, huh? Where they're getting out of the convoy and heading up to the little, they call it treetops. And this is an actual place. It's a hotel you can still go to. I actually looked this up. It's called the Treetops Hotel. And you go up there and you stay in these bungalows, roll up in the top of these trees in Kenya, and you kind of watch over the wildlife. There's, alligators, there's hippopotamuses. They're out there hanging out, looking at all this stuff. But I thought it was really cool, that, the way that the entire episode plays out, the way that, because this is 1950, 50s era. Yeah. There's no instant messaging. There's no, hey, let me give a quick phone call to this person. There's no, let me text this person, so, the part where her father passes away, that whole part right there was real intense for me,
Yeah, and I think even before, like the scene right before that too, where he's King George is singing with Margaret.
Yeah, that was a great.
And then he watches the press coverage of Princess Elizabeth at the time, arriving in Nairobi, and it kind of seemed like, he knew the world was going to go on, and so I think it was kind of fitting that. The next scene is when he passes, kind of a passing of the torch, if you will. And then just to see like the rest of the episode, how, Elizabeth, the princess, and kind of, you might even say more the civilian is having to become, a world leader. And, there's going to be a major character change in her for sure. But I think it's a good, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the part that kind of where it hits her more than anything, and of course, all of this is all speculation on how things actually went down. The historical part of it is actually true. She was in Nairobi when this happened, and but the things that are said, but the part where her private secretary Martin comes in and talks to her about what name she's going to choose as queen, right? Yeah. Her, hey, we need to choose your regnal name, and she's like, "What do you mean?" He goes, well, that's the name you're going to take as queen. Your father was named, I can't remember what her dad's name, but he took
his name was Albert, but he took King George.
Took George. Yeah. And her uncle was named David, but took King Edward. So now he's telling her, now you have to take your name. And she's like, well, what's wrong with my name? And he says nothing. They both say nothing. Her husband's there with her and her private secretary. They both say nothing. She goes, okay, well, let's not complicate it. My name's Elizabeth. And her private secretary then stands up and says, well, then long live Queen Elizabeth. And the shock in her face, the shock in Philip's face.
Philip, he just turns around.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing of significance about that part, RJ, is when they leave Treetops and they're actually going back to Great Britain, when they walk out of the house where they're staying at, that will be the last time that you see in the series. And it will also be the last time in his life that Philip leaves the house or steps out before his wife, because moving forward, he's not allowed to walk out in front of his wife. Yeah. That's illustrated in the part where they get off the plane and, he's telling her, well, I'm going to walk you down the steps. And the new private secretary, because once she becomes queen, she has to take the private secretary of the sovereign and not her private secretary anymore. So he has to go to the wayside. She has to take this new private secretary she's not comfortable with. And he basically stops Philip in his track, and he's like, no, the sovereign takes precedence. She has to go down first, and then you can, just by watching the rest of the series, you'll start to see that bitterness kind of build up in Philip and how he now becomes second to the queen. It's like, you know, this is my wife in 1950. You know, the man is supposed to reign supreme in a household. You know, that's the way it is in most of the world. And Philip is known to have said historically, well, what I now become a bloody amoeba in my own family. You know, my kids are not allowed to take my last name. I'm not allowed to live where I want to live. I have to live in Buckingham Palace. You know, I have to basically kowtow to my wife now because there's no other way around it. She's the freaking Queen of England.
Well, oh well.
Yeah, there's worse positions to be in life, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
it is. I mean, I was just gonna say. I mean, you know, it did make me go up and look some things up about the royal family that, you know, I really didn't know because you know, obviously I'm, you know, American and then also Mexican, so I really don't care too much. You know, I try to be, if you will, like knowledgeable about, you know, what's going on in the world at, you know, the present time. But, you know, I don't know how exactly how the British government works. I know they have a parliament, you know, they have a somewhat of a similar system, but also very different.
Figurehead, you know, the Queen, she's pretty much ceremonial. Everything has to run through Parliament, but you'll see in later episodes, if you watch it, they start to break down what the importance of the sovereign is to the people, as opposed to what it, you know, the government. You know, there's another episode that kind of goes back because each episode starts kind of in the past and kind of jumps to the point in time where they're at. And they do one episode where she's basically learning when she's a little girl about how to be a princess. And, you know, there's a scene in which she studies with the vice provost of Eton College. And she asked the vice provost, do you teach this to other pupils? And he goes, no, this is what I teach to other pupils. And he teaches them mathematics and, you know, literature and things like that. To her, from a very early age, all she's ever taught is government, you know, and what the importance of her role as the future Queen of England is. And, you know, it's called the dignified and the, God, I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it's a really great case study. If you go back and you do continue to watch it, if you do, I would suggest watching that episode because it kind of explains what her position is and how she learns from a very early age what her position is going to be and how she's supposed to handle that, as opposed to, you know, being raised as a normal young lady in England. But it's a really good, you know, go ahead.
I'll watch more of it. I think, you know, I'm going to start on episode 1. You know, me personally, while I know that we all picked episodes that, you know, weren't episode 1, season 1, I am, you know, I do like to see things from the beginning. And I know,
I do too. I wanted to just pick episodes that I felt like, man, this is what really hooked me on that episode, because the first episode is good and it gives a lot of backstory. But to me, the last 5 minutes of this episode, the part where she goes back to England and when she gets off the plane and you know, all of Parliament is basically standing outside her plane waiting for her to deplane. And, you know, and when she goes back to the palace and, you know, the train right there and all the people that are standing by the side of the road waiting for her train to pass just to see her, now that, you know, that we have this new queen. And when she goes to see the body of her father and, you know, when it becomes reality to her. And so there's a point, bro, where she comes out into the hallway and like the entire staff of the palace is out there waiting for her. And then her mom and her sister are waiting for her. And so the mom and the sister now have to come to her, kiss her on the cheek and curtsy to her because she's now the Queen of England, as opposed to earlier in the episode where you see her curtsy to her grandmother and her curtsy to her mom because they're the past queen and the reigning queen and she's just a princess. And you see that what RJ talked about, the transition of power. And man, the last 30 seconds of that episode when Winston Churchill gives his eulogy of the king and the way he talks about how they're moving into a new era with the new queen, bro, if you go back and just watch that piece of it, the eulogy that he gives is strong enough for you to go, wow, man, that's really, really moving. But the thing that got me was the very end when her grandmother walks in all in black with a black veil, and her grandmother's in her 80s and now has to curtsy to her. And the bow that she gives her is so deep and so, like she goes almost all the way down and touches the floor and back up. And to see this old lady do that and to see the look on her face, like, oh my God, I can't believe my grandmother's having to do this. Just the look and it's almost like fear that you see in her eyes. Like, oh my God, this is so real right now. But it's a great episode.
Yeah. The last two things I'll say is also that it was interesting. One was, Winston Churchill, besides the eulogy, was when, I can't remember the guy's name, but basically he goes to King George and, they're trying to get, Anthony Eden, and they're basically trying to, plot a way to get Churchill
out.
Out and, go a different direction. And then King George is just kind of like, no, I'm not doing that. I mean, it's more sophisticated than that, but, he basically says, I'm not going to do that. And then the next was how when they were deciding whether to let BBC, run with the story yet or not. And that guy had to make a decision call because they couldn't just wait forever to find out if Elizabeth had gotten word when she was in Nairobi. So
when all this news broke, all these news channels all throughout the world are reporting on King George's death, and she still hasn't found out yet because she's in Nairobi. Like I said, there's no telephone line to the hotel where she's staying at. Mm-hmm. So she has to be alerted by hand. So like the way that she finds out is Winston Churchill makes the decision to go ahead and let the BBC report on the king's death because they're holding it back until Princess Elizabeth finds out. And so they don't know whether she does, like RJ said. So he has to okay the story because it's breaking all over the world. And so they show her back in her little cottage, and she's actually writing a letter to her father saying that, hey, when we're done with this tour, Philip and I want to go back to our lives in Malta and resume his
naval career.
And she still doesn't know. And so her private secretary is in a bar with his assistant, and they're talking about the rest of the tour, talking about where they're going to go next and these things that they're going to do. And this guy rushes in. He's from Reuters. Reuters. I don't know how you say it. The news agency.
Reuters. Yeah.
And somebody calls him on the telephone in the bar, and he goes, hold on, let me check. And he goes into the room where the private secretary is. He turns the radio on, and they start talking about George's death. And the private secretary is like, oh shit, and so he runs and jumps in his car and, tells the driver, take me back to the Sagana house. That's where she's staying. And, the reporter's like, they don't know. And so next thing you know, all these reporters are following him back to this house so he can break this news to Elizabeth. So he gets to the house, and the first person he talks to is Philip, because Philip's taking a nap in the yard and Queen Elizabeth is in the house. So he goes to tell Philip, and when she comes out of the house to go talk to Philip, she's got the note to her father in her hand, and she sees her private secretary talking to Philip, and they're both kind of giving her this look like, and she can kind of start to put the puzzle pieces together. But what really gets her is when the private secretary walks up to her and bows to her, because that's something that they don't have to do to the princesses, right? Mm-hmm. Her and her sister, they don't have to bow to those guys. But when her private secretary walks up to her and bows his head, she knows that something's wrong. And that's when she goes to talk to Philip, and Philip breaks the news to her that her father just died. So it's really complicated, and it's really, like the whole part, you're like, oh shit, man, she doesn't know. Is she going to find out about it on the radio like everybody else? Mm-hmm. It sucks. Because I would hate to find out my dad died that,
exactly.
Finding out on a Facebook post or on a Twitter tweet, or on the radio, hey, by the way, this person died. And you're like, what? How did nobody tell me this? But it was really, really intense, that part. But, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. It's one of my favorite episodes of that series. I do love the whole series. I will tell you that in season 3, mm-hmm. they change out all the characters. So season 1 and 2, the queen is played by Claire Foy. And in season 3, she's played by the lady who won an Oscar last year for her portrayal of another queen in another movie. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but they switch out all the characters. They put in new actors for all of them to show as they age.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So as she's getting older, they're using an older lady. And so this
Yeah.
lady's got a 2-year deal. And then if this thing goes another, 3 or 4 years, they'll use an older lady to play the
Older.
queen older in life. Right.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Roland, we're going to move on to you. So my challenge to you was the episode of Game of Thrones, The Battle of the Bastards. So let's get your take on that one.
Well, definitely a lot of gore, a lot of fighting. You know, it's understandable. I mean, some of the because I think the series is rooted in a little bit in the historical involvement of all these conflicting power struggles. You know, you're going to have these epic battles.
Yeah.
I think for me, we probably should. I need to go back and really kind of start earlier in the series on maybe an episode or two. I think the episode you chose was so far into the storyline. I absolutely had no idea who or what characters to really root for. I had no sense of feeling for any of them. But I mean, for that, aside of that, I mean, there was a lot of action. There were definitely some interesting scenes. The battle scene at the very end was just it was really, in my opinion, a little over the top. It's like I was explaining earlier, it's very chaotic. So whenever you have just these mass armies, it always intrigued me how in history how you knew who the enemy was.
And I think that's part of the thing that when the showrunners put that together, that was part of the thing is they went back and actually studied, stories. Obviously there's no pictures, there's no film, there's no way to critique a battle back in that time. Right. But they did study stories and accounts of how those battles took place. And, that I think that was as realistic as they could make it, where you don't really know who you're swinging an axe at, or you don't know who you're swinging the sword at. You're just stabbing whoever comes at you.
That's right. And it made me think, well, man, there must have been a lot of friendly fire. you probably, half the people that died in your army were, because of wounds inflicted because of their own
person. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it was intense. Obviously, again, I think the scene where the sister
Sansa,
uses the her husband's hounds against him, and he bragged earlier in the episode how he hadn't fed him in over a week, and that he was going to feed his enemies to his hounds, and as he's sitting there tied up in that chair in that cell, and he's saying, well, these hounds will never turn on their own master. And she looks at him and says, well, as you said, you haven't fed them in a week. And of course, they just tear them to shreds. Yeah. I mean, that was pretty wicked. I think
just know that as you go through and kind of go back and watch some of the episodes, Ramsay Bolton gets what's coming to him, man. That dude is just, I don't know if you've seen the memes that says if 2020 was a person and they have pictures of him, right?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah.
And even if I had, I wouldn't know the context of that. And I would also say that the first probably 30 minutes of that episode, when it focuses on the other kingdom, the Queen
Daenerys.
of the Dragons. I don't know. Again, I don't know the character, and Peter Dinklage's character.
Tyrion.
Oh, Tyrion. Yeah.
So that was interesting because her kingdom was under siege and under attack, and I mean they're just getting bombarded with all these
Ships,
for what do you call catapult
fireballs?
Yeah, fireballs, exactly. And where they seek out an opportunity to talk to the aggressors, the masters, I think is what they're called.
Yeah.
And they're standing up there on the cliff overlooking the ocean. You can see their vast armada out there, and they're sitting there with their cocky attitude about how they're bringing her kingdom to its knees, and that she's there to negotiate surrender, only to find out that it's really her looking for them to negotiate their surrender. And then that one guy kills two of the three masters with basically one
Grey Worm. That dude's a badass, man. You'll start to see that dude's a pretty badass guy. But I think it was in that scene that you're talking about. It was, to me, it was kind of funny how the two that got killed sold that one guy out real quick.
Oh yeah, no, that absolutely.
You have to choose one, and they push him up forward.
He basically dropped to his knees, and he's acquiescing, and the other two, you think that guy's going to kill the guy who's on his knee, and he walks and he just whips out his dagger and slits the throats of the other two in one fell swoop. They're both dead, and then they're basically telling them, now get up and go tell your people what happened here, and and then of course the dragon scene. I mean, the dragons were pretty cool. The special effects on them was very, very high quality. You could see the again the ability of these guys to create just all kinds of special effects. It was really that I give kudos. So what it prompted
the amount
me
of
to
money
do,
that they put into all these episodes, man, is just ridiculous. The millions of dollars that they poured into them.
But it prompted me to go back and because I couldn't really identify with any of the characters, so I felt lost throughout most of the episode. And as we've spoken before, I have really just paid zero attention to Game of Thrones, so I really am oblivious to even mild mentions or any of the characters. I mean, I know who Peter Dinklage is, but that's about it. Yeah. And and Aquaman, what's his name?
Jason Momoa.
Yeah, even though he's not in that episode. So what I was going to say is I went back and I said, well, let me watch the very first episode. And Sean Bean, I'm a big Sean Bean fan.
Oh yeah.
From Lord of the Rings.
Oh
yeah. He's in a lot of series. He was in National Treasure. He plays Ian. He was in so he's in a lot of he plays a lot of characters that I like, and I really like him as an actor. So when I started there, I said, well, this is cool because I like him as an actor. So I was really interested in that first episode, and then I quickly understood why you guys watch it.
Oh my gosh!
Because of all the naked ladies.
No, that's like the macaroni and cheese to the T-bone steak,
Yeah,
it's a nice little side item, but the meat of it is the actual story, and you'll learn as you go through and watch it. I think where Game of Thrones starts to fall apart is where the written material runs out, and the last 2 seasons are pretty much shows that are written by the showrunners, right, with a little help from the author.
Okay.
So I think seasons 1 through 6 are all based on the books. And I think that's where the writing is excellent, that the storytelling is excellent, the acting is out of this world. And again, the special effects, because the amount of money that they put into these shows, where the stories kind of start to fall apart is in season 7. And a lot of people really panned season 8. I liked season 8. The Long Night is probably my second favorite episode of the entire series. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want you to go through and watch that one. I said Battle of the Bastards because to me, that's my favorite battle scene is, man, because the part where everybody's just kind of get crushed together, right? Yeah. And you see Jon Snow, he's like in the epicenter of all of it. And he's just being crushed. And that's real, that's probably about as real as it gets, because when you think about it, you had those massive armies that were fighting like that. And, just that whole crush and the way it kind of played out, that was kind of suffocating for me because I'm not claustrophobic in any sense, but to watch that part where he just kind of gets smushed in and being pushed, I can only imagine having been stuck in that. There's 2 ways I don't want to die. if I die any other way, I'd be okay with it. I don't want to suffocate, right? And I don't want to burn.
Mhm.
So drowning's out of the question. Fire's out of the question. Somehow losing my breath and not being able to breathe, that's all out of the question. If I die in a car wreck, okay, whatever. If I die getting hit by lightning, okay, whatever. But death by fire and death by suffocation are two things that I kind of fear. Right. So to see that part, the way he was just being crushed in the sea of humanity was kind of like, I was like, even I was trying to catch my breath. I was like, holy shit, that's rough, and even the way that the whole battle starts when he sends his brother to him, because the way it starts is he's kidnapped one of Jon Snow's little brothers. So he's got him in the castle, and that's the guy he sets free at the very beginning of the battle, where he tells him to run to him, and he starts shooting arrows at him, right? And that's why Jon Snow gets off his horse and goes to try to save his brother, is because he's trying to get to him before Ramsay kills him.
Right.
Unfortunately, Rick and his younger brother's not smart enough to run in a zigzag. He decides, I'm going to run in a straight line and just let these guys take shots at me.
Well, and I think that's the other thing. Like whenever we see some of these historical reenactments of these battles, you see these guys are basically raining down arrows, and arrows don't discriminate; they just kill whoever, and they're shooting arrows even when at their own people.
Yeah,
because they're just trying to volley as many and take out as many people as they can, without very much regard for their own people. They're taking just anybody out, anybody and everybody, just kill. And I do think that, because if you get a chance to watch The Last Kingdom, some of the battle scenes
I'll go back and watch
very similar in setup, in construct. Because you've got Danes and you've got the English fighting, and not all the English are wearing chainmail or wearing suits of armor. I mean, there's times it's farmers, it's other warriors that are dressed. So sometimes it can be confusing who exactly you're rooting for. Again, because it's just so much chaos going on, and that same phenomenon. At least a third of the people that you kill in a battle are probably your own comrades. People are on your side because you're just swinging. Whoever comes at you, you only have that nanosecond to make a decision of whether to deal a death blow or not. But I think all in all, I'm willing to go back and watch a few more episodes of the first season. I do like. I want to kind of understand the transition of the Dragon Queen. I don't know her character name yet, but in the very beginning, you can see she's this very introverted, soft-spoken, intimidated young lady, and her brother's basically whoring her out because he's trying to get power.
That's so uncomfortable. That scene where she's taking a bath and he walks in.
Exactly, and he
right there, dude. That's fucked right there.
Well, and not only that, the part where he is basically telling her that he will whore her out to all 40,000 members of that guy's tribe, including the horses, if it meant him getting his power back, getting his kingdom back, and that right there was just so sickening. I thought, and it's unfortunate to think that in reality there were probably several power ego strokes that would do shit like that, and but all in all, I think I'm willing to give it some time, see how whether or not I can get into the series, and maybe
all I can say is there's going to be some times where it slows down. Stick with it, right? Don't ever watch this with Annabelle in the room, right?
No.
Always keep her out of the room with this stuff, dude, because and there's going to be times where it sucks you in, right? Where you get done with one episode and you immediately want to go to the next episode, where you're gonna have to stop yourself because the episodes are 45 an hour long. Yeah, and that's the thing, is some of them are long, and some of them, are 60, 70 minutes long. They're movie length long.
Right.
So
I just want to say something Yeah, real quick on Game of Thrones. It's one of my favorite, series out there right now.
Me too.
A lot of people, I know didn't like season 7 or season 8, but I kind of liked, how
I did too.
I liked the ending, honestly. And honestly, when
I did too.
because I feel like I even though I didn't know the plot of it, because I felt like so many people, like, oh, if this many people think it's bad, then it's got to be bad. But after watching, I was like, I don't see what was so bad. I didn't really see any other way for it to end. And so
I think the people that are stepping out saying how bad it is are the people that kind of follow the books loyally, and they didn't want their books and their movies and their show to end that way.
Yeah,
I think
that's my next step is to start reading them. But yeah, there's a lot of character development that you should stick with it, Dad.
Yeah, I never read the books. I just watched strictly the shows.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. I enjoyed season 7 and 8, man. I thought that the way it ended, I was satisfied with the way it ended.
Yeah,
I felt really good about the way it ended. A lot of people didn't, but hey, that's on them. I enjoyed it. So I'm like with you, bro. Like with RJ, stick with it. There will be some times where it kind of slows down, right? But muscle through those parts, because I guarantee you the payoff in a lot of the episodes, the Battle of Blackwater, you're gonna really like that one. The Long Night, that's
the Long Night, yeah.
The Red Wedding will F you in the brain for a long time, dude. That one will, because it's so heart wrenching. But stick with it, man. There's a lot of good stuff there. But my episode, the first one I'm going to review, was the one that Roland suggested to me, Breaking Bad. So he suggested the one in which the main character, what's his name? Walt, kind of develops into the Heisenberg figure and starts working with that Mexican, I guess, cartel to start delivering the meth to him. And the episode that I watched was the one where I guess where he starts taking more and more risks in his life. And I guess the whole episode kind of deals with risk, because the sister-in-law gets his wife a tiara for their baby shower. And it turns out that she had shoplifted the tiara. And I think that what threw me for the loop is that girl's husband is like an FBI agent, or
he's a DEA. He's a DEA agent. Yeah. And he's pretty high up, and he's pretty high up in the in that office where he's at. Later on, if you stick with the series, he gets promoted to like the top dog, but he's essentially a cop, and he's when you go back and rewatch, if you go back and rewatch, it's interesting because Walt learns about the meth trade by going on a ride along with him. So they take him on a bus. They take him on a bus, right? And so while they're chasing down, they're actually chasing Jesse. They're looking for Jesse.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And so Jesse winds up escaping. Well, Walt recognizes him because Walt used to be his chemistry teacher. Okay. And Jesse escapes. They bust somebody else in the house. And, Hank is a little arrogant. He's a little full of himself. But he's a good man. He's a cop. He's dedicated to keeping, busting these drug dealers. And, but he's a little bit of he's, like I said, he's a little bit, high on himself. Right. And so he's got a different personality than Walt. When you first meet Walt is a very reserved, very intellectual, family man, dedicated teacher. And all of a sudden he finds out he's got cancer, and he realizes that it's advanced long enough that he knows that he's going to die. And he realizes that his entire life, you begin to you learn things about him, that he was actually a part of a startup business that ultimately makes it big, but he bails because him and Skylar start their family, and he's looking for steady income. So I don't want to give the whole storyline, you need to see it, but the character development, the reason I wanted you to see these episodes is because that episode and the episode before it, episode 6, you see the transition of Walt as he's coming to terms with his cancer and realizing that the way for him to make money fast is to start cooking meth. And so that's, so that's why I wanted you to see this, because like I said, these episodes are where you start to see his character change.
Yeah. And you can kind of tell that in the beginning where they're like at a parent teacher conference or they're at a school function or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so while the administrator's talking, he's inching his hand up his wife's thigh, and
oh yeah,
in the middle, and the teacher starts talking to him and he's like, oh, and his wife is like, and then they cut to the after and they're in the car doing it, mm-hmm. and that's kind of the, I think the point of that whole episode was just the part about taking risks, because then they show the scene at the baby shower where he's outside talking to the DEA agent. What's his name again?
Hank.
Yeah. Where they're talking about drugs. He's like, he's talking about, meth and marijuana and stuff like that to this DEA agent, knowing that he's doing some of that, Yeah. And the part where they need this chemical to make more meth because, mm-hmm. He promises the Mexicans like 4 pounds of meth. Right. Mm-hmm. And Jesse's telling him, man, there's no way I can steal that many boxes of
Sudafed or whatever. Yeah.
Because mm-hmm. Pseudomethane, whatever it is.
Yeah.
He's like, I would need 200 or 300 boxes. There's no way for me to get all that. And he's like, well, we'll make it another way. We'll get this chemical and we'll make it, a different way. And so they break into the factory and they steal that. And that part is so funny to me. They tie the stupid guard up. The guard goes to he goes into the porta potty and they tie a extension cord or something around it so he can't get out. And they're yelling at him, hey man, the alarm's going off. You want to go check that out? And he's like, he can't get out of the porta potty, and they walk right by him with the barrel. They're carrying it. And when they go back to the house and they're trying to figure out they're going to cook it, but then the RV doesn't start.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, I don't know where we can cook this. We can't cook it in my driveway. And so they wind up in the basement of that house.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the scene where they're going down and all of a sudden you see the barrel just rolling down the steps.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. And they're both chasing it. He's like, I told you not to drop it. He goes, man, it's heavy. And they're down in the basement cooking whatever it is they're cooking.
Right.
And the open house is going on upstairs.
Yep.
And people are trying to get in, and Jesse gets into a fight with that one guy because the guy wants to go downstairs and look at the basement. And they show the scene where Walt kind of opens the door and there's a little girl standing there.
Yeah.
And he's in full get up with the mask on and the gloves.
Yes.
That part was very funny. And, but at the very end, when they deliver this 4 pounds of meth and it's blue, and the guy's like, what the hell is this?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I guarantee you it's just as clean as the other stuff. And he takes it and he's real impressed with it. And he, throws them the money or whatever. And I guess tells him, give me another 4 pounds. We'll keep doing these deals. And they're about to walk away. And the Mexican guy's associate goes, yeah, and just remember who you're working for. And man, that Mexican, what's his name?
Tuco Salamanca.
Goes nuts on his own guy, man, and just beats the shit out of him. And the other guys, just his other associate, just kind of shaking his head, going, man, I told you not to say anything. And then he has to pick him up and drag his bloody body along with him and stuff like that. That was a really intense scene, man.
When you go back and watch the episode before, because I actually wanted you to watch that one. I made a mistake. I wanted you to watch episode 6, but go back and watch before, and you see more of that Tuco. That Tuco, he's berserk, man. That guy is crazy. His character is really, really over the top, and he's like a firecracker, man. He's got a very short fuse, and anything pisses him off, and he has no problem being violent. And as you watch the series, if you watch a few more episodes, that dude, he's like that in almost every episode he's in. even though he's in different situations, he's still kind of like very over the top. Even when he's at his grandmother's house, or with his uncle. But anyway, you'll see the whole Salamanca storyline comes in later on about how that whole family is really connected to the drug cartels down in Mexico. And Tuco's kind of like a local, like to put it in terms of like the mafia. He's like the local capo regime for that territory. I mean, he's up there, but he's not like one of the main bosses. I mean, there's still a couple of guys above him. But what I do like about the series is the fact that you see this very mild-mannered individual who, when faced with the reality that he doesn't have a whole lot of time, he's going to die, and he's a chemistry whiz, and he learns that he's really good at cooking meth, and quality meth, and his meth becomes the product that everybody wants. Like all the pushers are trying to get his meth, and that's what kind of starts to open doors for him. You'll see that it starts to also help build a level of arrogance in him.
Yeah,
but it's because he has this commitment to quality. He doesn't want to put out an inferior product. He takes pride in making his meth. And so, and it's funny about the reason, that they trip out about being blue, because when he first starts doing business with Tuco, the meth that Walt makes is like crystal clear. It's like, it's like glass. And that's what grabs everybody's attention is the quality of his product. And it's so
like the most pure it can chemically be.
But you'll see that because they use that different chemical to use it, and all of a sudden the meth becomes blue. Well, the blue meth is what becomes the signature in the series. Like all the other dealers are trying to figure out how to make that same kind of meth that Walt had. So that's why that blue, you'll see that blue meth becomes everybody's obsession. The DEA, they're trying to track down where the hell is this blue meth coming from. All the drug dealers want it. You'll see that as Walt begins to, build his empire, more and more people become interested in his method. And but anyway, I'm taking over the conversation. So, is there anything else that you liked about the any of the other characters?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were basically only really 4 or 5 characters in this whole series. In this episode, it was Walt, it was Jesse, it was Walt's wife, Hank, his sister, and the 2 Mexican guys. Yeah, the rest were all kind of just bit players. The guy who ran the jewelry store or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it caught my attention enough to where I tried Breaking Bad when a couple of years ago actually, and after the first episode, I was kind of like, not my cup of tea. But after watching this episode and after hearing about the one prior, I want to go back and watch that one. I think I could stick to it. I can muscle again, like I told you with Game of Thrones. There's going to be some slow parts to muscle through them. I think I can muscle through the slow parts of this to get to the good stuff. Because
I think what you'll find
it is.
What you'll find good is how Walt managed, especially in the first couple of seasons, how he kind of manages both his lives, because he's still he's with his family and with everybody that knows him. He's still trying to be this, very ordinary, very plain family man, even keeled. They start to feel sorry for him, obviously, because of his cancer. And I can tell you, even Hank kind of looks. I think Hank feels like Walt's kind of a little bit of a wussy, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So you have that, and then he just flips a switch, and he's becoming like this mastermind badass, super intelligent. They get into all kinds of situations, and he comes up with so many creative ways to get around things, and of course taking more bolder risks and developing this whole different persona that really is driven because of his desperate desire to make this much money, because he knows that the clock is ticking, and he knows that his condition is getting worse. He doesn't know how much time he really has. So for him, it's a race against the clock.
Right.
But it's just you start to see how it's interesting how he just flips the switch and goes in and out of each character.
I'm going to stick with this one. I'm going to try to go back and start watching the episodes again, obviously. And the good thing about this exercise is I think we're all kind of to the point where we watched everything we want to watch that we think is interesting. And I'm to the point where I'm cycling through other things that I've already seen, and I needed something new. And so this is a good exercise for me. So RJ, from your dad, you were given the task of watching, what's it called? The Last Kingdom?
Yeah, The Last Kingdom. So I believe it was season 1, episode 5, or
I think that's right.
Yeah. So in this episode, I'll start off by saying that, I've got a lot of Game of Thrones feel from the show. Right away in the beginning, or it's maybe not the beginning, but just having seen this episode, when I was watching Game of Thrones, I felt like, I'm sure like many other people, you feel kind of like you want to see Jon Snow win. And so I felt that way kind of about, what's his name again? Uhtred, yeah. I felt like right away, you just kind of feel like you want him to win, So
it's somebody you want to pull for.
Yeah, exactly. And so, going on top of that, he comes back and he forms his plan with Ada. Yeah. And so he basically, he says he's going to go set the boats on fire, and that, that's their opportunity, and that they should need to go attack with that, So then the son, Ada the younger, is like saying how, they should bail on him, basically use it as a distraction to get out. And it kind of leaves you hanging for a little bit. And then, they ultimately do, go attack and take over. And then there's, I can't remember his name either, but it's the guy. Huh?
Ubba, the leader of the Vikings.
Well, no, that's not who I was talking about. But Ubba, just speaking on Ubba real quick, he's a very, what's the word? Attention drawing, I guess, in a similar fashion. Even though he's on the opposite side, he just has this charisma about him. And so he reminds me of another character. They both remind me of characters from Game of Thrones, really. And but the part I was talking about is right after he kills Abba, and the guy comes up to him and tells him that he needs to go to King Alfred. And
Elfridge.
Yeah, where he tells him he needs to go, take credit for the kill, basically. Yeah, exactly. And Uhtred is like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So he's like, I want to see my son, and he has other plans. And then by the time he does get there, Ada the younger has already, gone to visit the king, and basically took credit for the kill. So I really liked the episode.
This is a far cry from talking about guys named Walt and Jesse to Uda and Upper.
The premise of this is the whole backdrop is telling about how the kingdom of England actually came together, because at one time England was in several different kingdoms. The Welsh kingdom, you had the Anglos, the Saxons, and so it also deals at the time period where the Danish invasion, and so the Vikings were coming over. Uhtred actually starts. He's an English born from the northern region of England. He's a Saxon, but the Danish invade his father's kingdom, and they kill his father, and they take Uhtred into slavery as a child. So, but Uhtred demonstrates a very brave spirit, and he protects the kind of the chief of that Danish tribe, that Viking tribe that took over, and so they adopt Uhtred, and so he's brought up as a pagan, in their religion,
Right.
Yeah.
but he was baptized as a Christian, so he's kind of from both worlds. And the thing is, as throughout his adolescence and his young adulthood, he identifies as Danish. He identifies with the pagan religion, and he's not, even though he has an understanding and an attachment to Christianity, he doesn't practice it. He's not a believer. He doesn't believe just in one God. Well, when Uhtred he winds up finding himself going to King Alfred, who at the time had just ascended to the throne because his brother dies in battle. And so Alfred has this vision. He's the one that has the vision for uniting all of England. And so he uses Uhtred as his warrior because he identifies that Uhtred has this ability. And even though he's what they call a heathen, a pagan, he has a recognition and understanding of Christianity. And so he is the perfect kind of blend of the two to kind of, he understands how the Danish fight. He understands what their superstitions are, their beliefs. And he uses it to train the English army. And so he becomes basically King Alfred's like
his right-hand man.
Well, no, because he's not full Saxon, or he doesn't identify as full Saxon. He's never the king's right-hand man. That's who Elfrich is. But he's like the second, if you will, second in command, and he's the one that's constantly pushing Alfred to go on the offensive when he needs to.
Gotcha.
In the episode I had RJ discuss is, so the Vikings are amassing this army and they're getting ready to attack. And so Ada, who is one of the king's advisors and has his own army, decides to go and they're going to go have this battle, and the king is supposed to join them later. But Uhtred, who you like RJ said, you quickly begin to root for him because he's not a boastful person. He's very reserved, but he has
an anger issue.
He has two things. Yeah, he does have an anger issue, but he's always dedicated to honor, and he's always using his brain to figure out, okay, how do we, we don't have as many men. We don't have the same. So he uses strategic planning on how to beat them. So he knows that that the Vikings, before they start their march, they have a night of partying. They have this, they just get crazy. So he gets the idea of going and burning their ships, because if they burn the ships, then they have no way to retreat. And if the army comes in and fights, they're basically backed up against the ocean, so they don't have anywhere to go. So you only really have to kind of surround them, and then take the fight to them. They can't go backwards because they're at the ocean, and their boats are gone, are all destroyed.
Yeah.
So like RJ said, so ultimately Uhtred basically proves himself by saying, "Hey, I'll be the one that goes out there, and I'm gonna set all the boats on fire," and he does it by himself.
Yeah,
and he's relying on Ada to come bring the
Keep
army.
his word.
Yeah, but the problem is there are several people in King Alfred's court who do not like Uhtred because he is a pagan. He is a heathen.
Right.
They don't trust him. They don't like him. They think that he's just out for himself. So there's a lot of people that are trying to undermine him. And his biggest one is Ada the Younger, which is he's kind of the new. He's very kind of like political savvy. He knows how to play
Right.
the king a little bit, and he's trying to figure out how to get rid of Uhtred, either get him killed, and so that's why RJ said that Otto the Younger was proposing to his dad, hey, let Uhtred go down there, burn everything. They'll be distracted, and we can escape.
Yeah.
We can get out of here.
He's shady. That's for sure.
He's very shady. But ultimately, what winds up happening is they have the battle. Uhtred beats Ubba, who is the leader of the Vikings. But because he is pagan, because he is heathen, he wants them to die with honor, right? And the Vikings believe that if you're going to get into heaven, you have to die with your weapon in your hands.
Right.
So that weapon for Ada is a big axe, right? And so when he kills Ubba, when he kills Ubba, he gives him the axe. Well, Ada the Younger takes the axe, and he delivers it to King Alfred, and he's the one that claims the victory. Well, like RJ said, Uhtred, he wants to go home and see his wife because they were having a baby.
They had a baby, yeah.
So he wants to go see his son. He doesn't go directly to the kingdom. He goes first to go see his son, and then they go to the kingdom. So by the time they get to the kingdom, everybody's celebrating, and Ada has claimed the victory. And so,
that's effed up, man.
oh man, and it gets worse. I mean, because Uhtred, like RJ said, he has an anger issue, so he immediately becomes angered, and he wants to see the king. He's demanding to see the king. Well,
he draws his sword in the middle of the court or something.
Well, and the thing is, like, because the King Alfred is very religious. Mm-hmm. The two things you don't do is you don't interrupt prayer time, right? And so here comes here comes Uhtred bursting into the church, I guess, for lack of a better way, where they're praying, and starts making all these demands, and the king gets pissed off, and so essentially he punishes Uhtred. Even though Uhtred was the one that really won him the battle, but this Otto the Younger, stole the credit. Anyway, I think too, Jay, if you look at this, because you're, like you said, you're an Anglophile, you're into the royal family. I think you would like this series if you gave it a little bit, because what it is, even though it's loosely based on that time period, it does have some elements of historical reality, and some of the important battles that lead up to the formation of England. And even though King Alfred, he put the foundation in place, it's really his grandson who's the first true king of England. Right. And so, but you get to see how the formation begins, and this unification. And even though he's a fictional character, there is in history, there is an Uhtred, I think he's Uhtred the Brave, or Uhtred the but his lifespan was at the very tail end of King Alfred's. So I think they kind of loosely create this storyline. But I like it because, one, it's rooted in history. And two, Uhtred, the two things that, even though he gets screwed time and time again throughout the entire series, is he's a man of honor. He never compromises his honor. So, like, when he gives his word, he keeps his word, even though
that's kind of the way, in Game of Thrones, Jon Snow is the same way. You'll see that as you watch through. Jon Snow is a man of honor, man. He won't do anything that will make him look dishonorable. So I think that's a good way to kind of transition and analogize both one. But let's move on to the second episode you were tasked with watching, which was Narcos Mexico.
Yeah, Narcos Mexico. So I think I can definitely get into the Narcos series because, again, it's a series based on actual events, historical things that have happened. This particular episode that RJ had me watch, Narcos Mexico, first of all, while the Spanish is easy to keep up with. It is predominantly in Spanish, like 75% of the episode in Spanish. So I think even if you have subtitles on, if you're not really proficient in Spanish, it can be a little challenging to keep up with it. That being said, though, I think I'm going to go back and begin watching this series too, because what I like about it is, again, it's rooted in historical events.
Mm-hmm.
Things you see in this particular episode are the one character who comes up with the idea of tunneling under the border.
You know who that is, right?
Huh?
El Chapo. That's El Chapo.
That's Chapo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's the guy that becomes
Joaquin
El Chapo?
Chapo.
Yeah.
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. So that's one of the good things about this one is it kind of introduces you to Chapo and El Chapo and you know how he gets involved in the Mexican drug trade and things like that. How he gets in, and as you go further along in the series, he becomes more of a player.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's because you see, I can't believe I didn't recognize that's El Chapo, because you recognize that at first they portray that character as kind of like a third tier.
And that's what he starts out as.
Yeah,
he starts out as just kind of a third tier tug
on him, and until he gets this idea that he buys the house on one side of the border and the house on the other side of the border, and says, I'm going to dig this tunnel. And of course, when the higher ups find out about it, then they're like, oh shit, dude, you're onto something, get to work. And, he's obviously a man of vision. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the kind of the context of how the U.S. is just as involved in the drug business.
Oh God, yes, dude.
Particularly when they're talking about the Sandinistas and the people down in Nicaragua, and how they're making deals on, look, you help me overturn these drug lords, I'll be put me in their place. Yeah. And I'll show you all these different trade routes that you can bring in your illegal arms to continue to train and the Sandinistas. And
there's a good tie-in to the original Narcos series, because I think the main character in this one actually goes to visit what's his name? Pablo Escobar.
Oh yeah.
He goes to see him in one of the episodes, and I like starting out with this one that you can kind of follow it. But when you get done with this series, go back and watch the original Narcos, the one that focuses on Pablo Escobar. That's a really strong series, man. I
think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and watch the Narcos first, and then come back in the Narcos Mexico, because I think have you guys seen that movie that Tom Cruise did, American Made?
Yeah. That guy is featured in the guy. He's actually featured in one of the episodes of Narcos.
Really?
Yeah.
That pilot.
Yeah, the pilot. They one of the episodes deals with him and his death. And you'll see it in the Narcos ones as well, how the American government is kind of intertwined with all this,
right?
With all this, BS going on in other countries too, man. How they're getting in with some of the guerrillas in Colombia to try to help fight Pablo Escobar. So you've got the thing is, the CIA and the FBI and the DEA, none of these guys or any of them are on the same page. They all have their own different agendas. Yep. The DEA has its agenda, the CIA has his agenda, and the FBI agents have their agendas, right? And so they're kind of like, it's kind of almost disturbing to see how they backstab each other, and they work for the same government. Yeah. It's like, this is crazy. Like, we're supposed to be part of the same war fighting these druggies, the drug traffickers, but yet you're over here making all these side deals with the Sandinistas, and this dude's over here making all side deals with the dealers themselves, and it's kind of you kind of get to see how messed up our government is. Yeah, the way that they played it in both episodes, in both the regular Narcos and Narcos Mexico, it's kind of the same deal.
Yeah, and so I picked the Mexico one over regular Narcos because I feel like this one just hits closer to home. Obviously, I think this one, they both include the government, but I think this
Mhm.
one, I picked it for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you see El Chapo's emergence as a kind of an
Yeah.
idea guy. He doesn't want to just be someone who's running from point A to point B. He kind of wants to get bigger in the game, if you will. And then you also, in this episode, is when Felix goes to see Don Neto and Rafa in jail, and those are like the guys he like really started this all with, and they basically like hate him because they just wanted to grow weed, and then he's the one that really wanted them to get him cocaine. And
Yeah.
then that's when everything, like after that, they just were like, "Why did you?" Like I'm pretty sure it's this one where um, he's Don Neto when he goes to visit him in jail. Miguel does. He's like, why did you have feel the need to keep it going? Like we had something good. Why did you need to grow it more? In other words, basically. And he ultimately turned his back on his friends so that he can keep the organization together and everything. But yeah, I mean, mostly just because like I said, it's closer to home and
Yeah.
it's history I know more about a little bit more so than the
Well,
Colombian.
I think the DEA agent in this one, the Mexican DEA agent,
Mhm.
um, he there's a documentary on that guy too.
Yeah,
Um,
that's season
and
one. See, yeah, so he's in season one, the one you're talking about.
oh,
Season
okay,
season two just came out, I believe, beginning of this year or end of last year,
yeah.
and so I don't know if you've had a chance to watch season two, but
No,
yeah, you
I
definitely
think I didn't get past season one. But yeah, the DEA agent, the Mexican guy in
Kiki.
season one, yeah, Kiki. There's a really good documentary about that dude and his life, somewhere on Netflix. I cannot remember the name of it, and I kind of remember because Diana and I watched that documentary, and then when Narcos Mexico first came out and we started watching the first season, I'm like, hey, that's the DEA agent we just watched the documentary about, and so it's kind of interesting to see because it's all based on real life stuff, like you talk about. It's
Yeah,
all of this is all rooted in historical, you know. And I think for the most part, the series that we picked for each other, with the exception of Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, are all kind of rooted in in some kind of history. Um, oh well, the show that RJ gave me, House of
yeah.
Cards,
I wouldn't
isn't
say,
really either.
I, yeah, I wouldn't say it's rooted in history, but I picked. Well, do you guys want to get into that now, or
Yeah,
are we
yeah,
done
let's,
with Narcos
Yeah.
Mexico? Yeah, so I picked House of Cards because I watched a bunch of the early I don't know how many seasons there are, but I know I watched at least up
I
to
think there's
season
like
four.
six. Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched up to like season 4 or 5, and seasons 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 are really good. And I think even though it's not based on fact, it kind of does gives you some insight into how things may work in our country.
Yeah,
Um,
and
you
the
know, it,
political. I tell you what, man, the political um, espionage and the political, mumbo jumbo that's going on behind the scenes. You know, it,
mhm,
I've always said that when those guys get to a certain level, it's no longer about the people they serve, right?
yeah,
The only time that they care about you is when they need your vote, right? When it's
yeah,
time to get elected, that's when they care about you. But when they get to that level, the shadiness that's going on, man. Because the episode you chose for me, RJ, Kevin Spacey's character, that guy is a snake, man. And
yeah,
the way that he finagles himself into becoming president of the United States is masterful. Because in the start of the series, I've never seen any episodes of it. This is the first time watching it, so I kind of got the gist of it pretty quickly, just because everybody was out to get him. The president didn't like him. The president had enlisted, I guess, his ex aide to try to get some dirt on him, to get Gerald McCraney's character to
mhm,
testify against him. Like they were going to do all these things to get him, and I think he kind of realized that that things were going to go bad for him, and so um, he, the way he just kind of um, the way he just kind of turned everything back on everybody else. Because the president makes a deal with Gerald McCraney's character, and gives him immunity, and so he's like, okay, so I'm going to give immunity to Gerald McCraney's character, and Gerald McCraney's going to testify against Kevin Spacey's, the vice president. And so the vice president goes to see Gerald McCraney's character and basically says, look, dude, if you testify against me, it's a losing proposition for you, because I'm going to become president, and this is how I plan on doing it. And the next thing you know, you see the vice president pulls out this old typewriter that his dad had given him, and types this letter to the president, basically saying, hey, look, I know we're not on good terms right now, but I'm still your guy. I'm still here to help you. I'll throw myself onto the fire. I'll throw myself onto the sword. Here is this letter that implicates me, that I'm going to sign, that is like basically a signed confession. You can use it at your will. I'll take the hit so that you can remain president. And the president just is taken aside by that and going, hey man.
Shocked, yeah.
So yeah, he's like shocked, but he's still kind of suspicious. He's like, look, I'm not saying I trust you, but I'll bring you back into the fold. And little by little, he brings them back in. And Kevin Spacey's just like, hey, look, this is what we need to do. I can get this senator on our side. I can get this congressman on our side. I can do this. I can do that. And so he starts making all these backroom deals. And the president winds up pulling his word from Gerald McCraney's character, saying, you know what, your immunity's gone. Never mind. I'm not going to do that anymore. And Gerald McCraney turns on him. And basically sitting in Congress, he's pleading the fifth for all these things. And finally he just says, you know what? He knew, the president knew this happened. This Chinese guy is doing this and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of lays everything out. And so now the Senate, or the House of Representatives, votes to basically impeach the president. And the president knows he's caught. There's nothing he can do. And so what does he do? He winds up resigning to rather than facing impeachment. And Kevin Spacey gets what he wants all along. He gets elevated to president of the United States because he's a vice president. I mean, it was just so crafty. And it took me till the last 15 minutes of watching that episode to figure out what he was doing, until the president pulled the immunity from Gerald McCraney's character. And Gerald McCraney's like, you know what? F that dude. I'm basically going to scorch the earth. And it's like, oh, I see what you did there. You basically turned everything back onto the president, away from you. So now the president has no choice but to resign, and I become president of the United States. I mean, it was just so crafty the way he did it.
It's funny because have either of you seen the series Designated Survivor?
I've seen parts of it, and I really like it. I kind of fell off from it, but
no, me too. But the reason I bring that up is because I think all these shows that are rooted in politics, right, demonstrate just how cutthroat and backstabbing we believe that whole system to be.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, while you're absolutely right, Kevin Spacey, he's genius in how he lays out his plan.
Manipulates himself into the presidency.
Well, yes. Yeah. But I do think that, I mean, there's constantly special interest jockeying for position.
Yeah.
Always.
Absolutely.
It's a constant management of power and power struggles and people being in the president's ear. And, what I recognize is, before I got into real estate, when I was in school, I took a lot of political science classes. Because, at one time I was thinking about going into law. But anyway, in studying several of those classes, what you begin to see is public administration and policy, right? And so you see all these power brokers basically pulling no punches whatsoever. I mean, they play hardball.
Oh yeah,
You know, you're you're either going to play ball or you're not going to play. But we'll figure out how to get your ass thrown out of here one way or another.
Yeah, that was, you know, part of what Kevin Spacey's plan was when he went to go see Gerald McCraney, was basically telling him, look, you're going to fall in line with me because I'm going to become president, or you know what, you're just going to burn yourself and you're going to wind up behind bars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what happens, you know, by Gerald McCraney going and implicating the president and implicating the fact that he knew all these things. You know, when he walks out of that hearing, the first thing he does is he walks out with his arms up like this, fully expecting to be arrested as soon as he walks into the hallway. And I don't remember if she's like of the FBI or the CIA, who she's with, basically says, look, I'm not going to arrest you right now if you come with me and let's talk some more about what you know. And so it's that kind of, you know, what you're talking about, them playing hardball, say, look, you're either going to do what I want you to do or I'm going to torch you somehow, you know, and that's what kind of what I took away from them. I'm like, Jesus, man, these guys are ruthless.
Yeah, you definitely should watch from season 1. I think that's a show where pretty quickly it gets started on. So I think, you know, I'm not on the current season, but, you know, I would say that the latter seasons, like the last 2 probably aren't as good, but those first 3 or 4 seasons, if you got time, get into it.
Well, man, his wife is something else too, because when he goes to see Gerald McCraney, and Gerald McCraney basically tells him no, you know, he goes back home and his wife is like, look, did you talk to him? He's like, yeah, but he's not gonna, you know, testify against the president, and he's going to probably testify against me. And his wife just lays into it, man. She's like, look, I don't know what you were going to do, but you need to figure something out, and she just goes on a tirade on him. And it kind of humbles Kevin Spacey a little bit, to the point where that's where he hatches the idea that I'm going to write this letter of resignation to the president and basically say, look, I'm going to take the blame for everything so you continue to be president. And that's where he lays out his plans to kind of just slowly start to turn everything back against the president. Before you know it, the president's the one resigning. And, you know, he gives Kevin Spacey back the letter that he wrote him. Kevin Spacey just throws it into the fire. Like, you know, it was just such a brilliant keystroke the way he did it, man. It's like, it was because it was swift, the way he came up with the idea, because it's more than halfway into the episode when he hatches his plan and how he's going to do this. And before you know it, he's already basically turned the tables within 10 minutes, you know, episode time. But it was really, really, it's a really good, interesting view into politics, which is one of the things that kind of draws me into The Crown, is that I'm into the political aspect of it and stuff like that. I like shows about politics. Designated Survivor, I do like that show, bro. That when the first couple of episodes, the way he becomes president is really good. It's just that I don't know. I just kind of fell out of having time to watch it, and I just kind of strayed away from it.
Well, I think I got a little tired, because it's the show premise is very formulaic in that once he solves something, then he's presented with a whole new obstacle, and it's like everybody's trying to undermine him. Everybody's trying to erode his power, basically saying you weren't elected president, you just became president because this catastrophe happened, and all the people that were in the line of succession before you were taken out, so you're kind of our last.
And the president was even going to fire you.
Exactly. And so, and so the way he has to essentially not only step into the role of president and try and reassure the country that, you know, that they're going to get to the bottom of what happened, the bombing and everything. It's juggling all these people that are trying to, again, take away his power base from him,
trying to undermine him. Yeah,
exactly. And the way he, you know, in that series, very early on, he's challenged by the governors of different states and saying, you know, you're not, you know, we don't recognize you as the president, which, you know, to me is a little far-fetched, because if something like that, if some catastrophe like that were to legitimately happen, if our system of government can easily be that tweaked, then we got problems. So, you know, I know it's fictional. Same thing in the House of Cards, the episode you guys are talking about. That's the one thing I kind of, while it was quote unquote masterful and deceitful what Kevin Spacey did, the fact that the president resigned, to me, was a little far fetched. I mean, I know that Nixon resigned at the risk of being impeached. However, I think in modern politics, our current president is the perfect example. Man, all you have to do is cast enough dirt up in the wind, pick on some other storyline, some other soundbite, and you kind of diffuse the problem a little bit. The other thing is, to impeach a sitting president requires a
both the House and the Senate.
Yeah. And the reality of that happening, because even certain instances where, well, for like example, you look at Bill Clinton's issue, right?
Yeah.
Is even though a lot of people can say what the president did was wrong, it was immoral, at the end of the day, they're not going to turn their back on their party, because they're not going to turn around and give the other party the ammunition they need to basically clean house the next election cycle. Yeah. So, that's why some of these things you look at the storylines, and that they're rooted in fiction.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see how it is a constant viper pit, right? That everybody is just,
man. I'll tell you what, it was
power, and everybody is double dealing. Everybody is, and that kind of sours you on how politics was meant to be, because you elect people to go up there, and with the ideology that they're going to truly represent you and really be your voice in the government, when in reality, all it is people up there trying to make wheels and make deals, and
wheeling in,
and basic, well, and procure power centers for their money people. Right. And even like what Kevin Spacey did in that episode, to me, it's just the way it happened so quickly. Because again, even though we're at lightning speed in terms of media, the logistics, right? The logistics of getting Congress all assembled, the House of Representatives, all the Senate, and getting everybody together, and then coming up with, look at what happened with Trump. They worked to impeach him. How long did that damn process take? Right?
Oh yeah, it was months.
So by the time in that same timeline that all that's going on, there are so many other things going on in our country and in the world that just by nature stuff gets diffused. And so but anyway, going back, I think House of Cards too I think it's well written. Kevin Spacey, I know he's a creep at the end of the day, but
he's an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's very talented actor. He's a phenomenal actor. It's shameful that in life he had his, he did what he did, and I make no apologies for any of these guys. But in terms of acting, that guy is phenomenal. He's just very talented, and the way
if you guys can ever get a chance, YouTube his impression videos.
Oh no,
there's an impression. Yeah. Have you seen him?
He's really good. Yeah, the ones he did.
His Johnny Carson impression is spot on, man.
Well, his Christopher Walken's pretty good too.
Yeah. You gotta watch those. All right. Well, we're kind of rolling up on probably what looks like about an hour and 40 minutes here. So, bro, why don't you end this? Put us out of our misery.
Hey, so I think what we'll do is we do need to probably review a couple more series, or maybe what we do is we pick up on our next episode, pick up and talk a little bit more. Like maybe we watch each watch another couple of episodes in these series and have a little bit more discussion. But until that next time, we really appreciate you guys sticking it out with us. We know this was a long episode. We talked a lot about 6 different episodes of different series. If you guys have any comments or observations or recommendations for us that we ought to be watching.
Yeah, if there's a series you want us to watch, I'll watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Please leave us comments, and remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Also, click the little bell so that you get notifications when we put out these new episodes. So with that said, until next time, thank you for watching Now That You Mention It podcast with Roll, Jay, and RJ. I'm Roll.
I'm Jay.
And I'm RJ.
Until next time, thank you, Jesse P, because we could not do this without you. Have a good night.
Amen.